Okay, good morning, good Erev Shabbos, everybody. This morning, I want to talk about a subject that comes up very, very often, perhaps is somewhat misunderstood, and that's the area of economic competition in halacha, which is colloquially known as hasagas gvul. Hasagat gvul literally means removing a boundary marker. When people would live next to each other, there would be a demarcation point in between them. So if you move that boundary marker to get an unfair advantage, that's called removing hasogat gevul, but it's also applied to if a person encroaches on someone else's business and perhaps steals a livelihood from him. That's also considered hasogat gevul. So the notion of eliminating an individual's ability to earn a livelihood in one place in the Gemara is actually equivalent to murder. It's a very serious thing. But there are a number of halachic texts which, for a variety of reasons, are not always binding, as we shall see. The primary discussion, or one of the initial discussions, is Gemara in Bava Basra, which talks about fishermen. If a guy is fishing in a certain area, you may not put your net next to his net, because the fish would otherwise have gone to the first guy's net are now going to go to your net, and you're basically taking away his livelihood by putting your net next to his. Basically, the same thing applies if you want to open a business nearby or next to another business of a similar type. That might be considered unfair competition, or hasagas gevul. And there are a number of situations that I want to explore with the Gemara and try to bring it up to contemporary situations. If you have a mill, for example, in town, and somebody wants to open up another mill, so there's a machlokas in Gemara as to whether or not the second guy can open up his mill. And at first glance, it would seem that the Gemara permits somebody to open up a competitive business, as long as you're not inflicting damage. That's the key point. If there is sufficient business to provide a livelihood for both mill owners, then if the second guy opens up a mill, it is not necessarily considered unfair competition. And on this subject, apparently there's a lot of discussion. The Rishonim, the Rif, the Rambam, Shulchan Aruch don't even mention the whole story about fishing nets. In fact, some Rishonim reject the whole notion of restrictions on unfair competition. It's the American way. Well, apparently it was the Babylonian way as well, and some of the Rishonim don't feel it's a major problem. However, in the Gemara itself, the Amoraim are not happy with this. And they give you the following example. The way streets were constructed, you had alleyways. Now, if the alleyway is open on both ends, then a person can operate a business on one end and on the other end, because people lived adjoining those alleyways. So if I open up a business, a stall outside my house, and I'm at one end of the alley, and somebody opens up his stall at the other end of the alley, so people are passing by on both ends, that's not considered unfair competition. However, if it's a dead-end alleyway, and I'm on the dead-end side where my business is, and people come down the alley to my business, another person may not open up a business at the mouth of that alleyway, because that will be considered unfair competition. They'll go to the other guy, they'll never make it down to the first person at the other end of the alleyway. So and the whole notion of whether you have an established business in one end, can you open up a new business if somebody already established a business in a certain location?
Wally,
Yes.
what about the fact that I might have a more technological business and can save the consumer's money?
Okay, so the Mefarshim do talk about that. When they're talking about two identical businesses, that's one scenario. But if the other business, for example, offers better quality merchandise or a better price, or in your case, more technologically advanced merchandise, there would seem to be more permissibility in that area. So competition is good if it improves the quality of merchandise being offered to consumers, but not if it takes away from the original person that was there first. And the major distinction that they make in the halacha, in the Gemara as well, is that if the person who opens up the new business, so to speak, if he's a local person, then they have what to talk about. But if he's not from that area, if he's an outsider, then the majority of poskim say he may not do that. A guy can't come in from the outside and open up a new business when somebody from town has already been there for a while. So that's also a factor to be considered. And the machlokes is very intense, shall we say, but they don't come to a conclusion. And the Shulchan Aruch basically says no outsiders can come. And in the Gemara itself, the machlokes is resolved by saying, Teku, we don't know the answer. I mean, everybody should be entitled to make a living, but there's so many factors involved. Better merchandise, better prices, a local person versus an outside person. The Gemara, as I say, does not reach a definitive conclusion. Conceptually, we understand that you shouldn't take away a livelihood from another person. Conceptually, but halachically, it's not so clear because there are many, many factors to consider. On one hand, the Gemara also says if an outsider comes in and he pays his taxes, he's permitted to compete.
Wally,
as if he were a resident, yeah.
Do all these rules also apply to shuls and schools?
Interesting question. It depends. If there are sufficient students to support all of these schools, then it wouldn't be a problem. If you have a school in a community which barely has enough students to support the school, then opening up another school would be problematic unless the school offers a better quality education or better facilities. And again, because it's a gray area, you have different poskim coming to different conclusions. But we had this situation in Bergen County many, well, not so many, well, a number of years ago. The population of the schools were just bursting. Yavne and Mariah were just bursting at the seams. They had no room to expand. And they were just too many schools, too many people to accommodate the schools. More children were being born in Bergen County, and we needed another day school. And I took Rabbi Yudin for a ride, and I confiscated his phone at the time, and we went. And I sat down with him, and I said, "Listen, we need another school in Bergen County." And he convinced the RCBC, yes, we do. Now, in his mind, he wanted to open up a YNJ type of school in Fairlawn. That's what he wanted to do, and the rabbis agreed with him. Fine. So they had the first parlor meeting, and it became very clear that what the people wanted was not a YNJ type school, but a Yavne Mariah type school. So the RCBC kind of faded into the background, and the parents took over, and thus no one was born. And it is succeeding, and it's growing, and then pretty soon we may need another. We have a lot of day schools that cater to every possibility. So it's not competitive because there's so much available, and there are so many students that they have this. So it's not a question. If you're in a small town in the middle of nowhere and you have one day school that's barely surviving, so opening up another school would be considered, unfair competition if I were the rabbi in charge. But unfortunately, because this issue was so murky and so gray, I'll come to it later on when we had this situation in Bergen County with certain type of stores and restaurants. It could be a serious problem. But the Rishonim and the Achronim are all over the place on this. There's been a big machlokas since the time of the Rishonim regarding where to draw the line between legitimate economic competition and unfair damage to somebody else's livelihood. It's a very fine line. Many Rishonim define unfair competition in very broad terms. We talked about the Movli situation, the alleyway situation. Others are simple, say that local competitors are unrestricted. Local. Outsiders, however, is another problem. We'll get to that later. But rival businesses, is good in many cases. Is good for business. Now, again, if one business is offering shoddy material, another business has better quality material, that's a different story. Let's see. Again, yes.
What about today's times? You go to a shopping mall, you'll have 20 shoe stores, 15 eyeglass stores, etc. So they're all in the same place. You look at the food court, every restaurant is next to another one.
Right, and they're all managing, and they're all because there's sufficient population to support all these stores. Now, again, it depends on the situation on the ground. If there's enough of a population to support 20 different food stores in the court, whatever it is, then they're all making money. And you go to a mall and you can get 10 different types of coffee in different coffee shops, or different donuts, or different pizzas, because there's enough people there to support them. In the 16th century, the Ramah Pasuk, there were two Italian publishers who published the Rambam's Mishneh Torah. And the first issue came out, then it was doing well. And then a second publisher published a second edition of the Rambam, an inferior quality, but it was cheaper. And the Ramah Paskin that he had to cease and desist, because it would ruin the first publisher's business, because he was the first one to come out with it. There weren't that many people buying copies of it at the time. And the second publisher should not be patronized. And he put up psak because he was ruining the original publisher's livelihood. So you have some poskim who come down very strongly, but it depends on the situation in every given scenario. And there are many, and when you're dealing with people's livelihoods, be very, very careful. The Rashba also limits free enterprise based on the story of the fishing nets. So you have, but it's a machlokas rishonim. Some do and some don't. The Chasam Sofer permits competition when the new store will only decrease the profits of the original proprietor. If it'll cut into his business, you can't do it. However, competition that will eliminate the original proprietor's ability to earn a living is also forbidden. Decreasing profit is a gray area, but there's definitely, if it put him out of business, it's prohibited. He also says that you can give makos, lashes. You can whip somebody who competes unfairly. That's a very strong statement. You can whip somebody, give makos to somebody who engages in unfair competition, based on that Ramah of the publishers. He also says that you may not engage in unfair competition even if the original owner has another trade to support. Let's say a guy was a teacher and he decided to go into the shoemaker business. You can't open up another shoemaker to deprive him of his business because he has another trade that he can engage in. That's irrelevant. If he's in this business, you can't compete with him unfairly. Not everybody agrees, and there are many people who allow unfair competition because it is such a gray area. In contemporary halacha, and that's what I want to finish up with, Rav Moshe Feinstein, Igros Moshe, says that you may not, he's strict, you may not open a business if it's going to destroy someone else's livelihood. Now, it's not a question of putting food on the table, but it's taking away his ability to live at a certain level. And he prohibits unfair competition. there are some Sephardic poskim who also agree with this, and there's a fascinating discussion about different rabbis in the community who sell chametz before Pesach. If everybody was selling the chametz to one particular rabbi, because usually when you sell chametz, you make a donation. So many rabbis relied on this as supplementary income. And a new rabbi can't come to town and start selling chametz because it'll take away the income of the original guy that was doing this. But again, there are some contemporary. The classic case. We had several scenarios in Teaneck. Many, many, many years ago, as Teaneck was first developing as a Jewish community. There was a very fine dairy restaurant, a high-end dairy restaurant on Cedar Lane, very nice restaurant, under the RCBC. And another dairy restaurant opened up on Cedar Lane. And the owner of this first dairy restaurant went to the RCBC and said, how can you allow another restaurant to open up? When I've been here already. I live in the community. And this person's from outside the community. How can you allow a second restaurant to open up when I'm just getting by here? And Rabbi Adler and Rabbi Gordon presented this situation to Rav Soloveitchik. And it happened in another scenario as well. There was a pizza store, and somebody wanted to open up a second pizza store on Cedar Lane. And Rav Soloveitchik said that they can open up the other restaurant and the other pizza store. Because in America, he said, there's no restriction on competition. Now, he didn't give any sources, but he gave a psak. And as a result, that dairy restaurant was put out of business. And interesting.
My recollection is
what's that?
That at first my recollection of that situation is that at first the RCBC refused to give the hashgacha on a competing restaurant,
Right.
And then they changed their mind, possibly after the talk of Soloveitchik.
Yeah, well, at the conclusion that they came to, because there were several situations. There was one with a butcher shop more recently that was put out of business. And basically, the RCBC said that Hasagas Gevul doesn't exist anymore in our community because there's enough population to support it. And the truth was, there was a little butcher shop on Cedar Lane, and he just expanded. He was doing very, very well. A nice guy. And when Cedar Market came in, literally across the street from him, they put business. Because RCBC said
that was recently.
Personally, I think it was a mistake that the RCBC made, but I can't get involved in that because I have no standing with the RCBC. In my opinion, it doesn't matter very much. But the RCBC made a determination after consultation with Herschel Schechter that Hasagas Gevul doesn't apply anymore in America. And given the size of the community and it's growing and so forth, that there's enough business for everybody. But the truth was there isn't. Interestingly, from a legal perspective, from a totally legal perspective, all restrictions of economic activity actually violate civil antitrust statutes, which is a whole other ballgame. So if you can put limitations on business expansion, you might also run afoul of civil law as well. And then therefore, Dina de Malchus or Dina, the law of the land applies, and therefore you have to look at it very, very carefully. It's a very sticky issue because people's livelihoods are at stake, and in most situations, they rule in favor of competition. There's no clear consensus as to when to allow it, and it depends basically on the individual dayanim in each case. Again, if there's predatory pricing, it's different. If trying to undercut somebody, that's a different situation. There are certain monopolies that might be necessary, like in transportation, for example. But clearly, companies, if you have in Israel, there's a whole discussion about insurance companies, whether they can, have competition in terms of their rates and so forth. Bottom line is, it's a very complex area. It depends on many unresolved halachic disputes and also changing business conditions and population growth. And therefore, everything has to be submitted to reliable authorities. I remember when I was in high school, many, many years ago, the standard English translation of the Talmud, the first one that came out was called the Sansino translation. A wonderful translation, big volumes, like 20 or 30 volumes. Usually, most people used it in the library because it was too expensive for an individual to have. So somebody came along, and he pirated the translation. He stole it literally. It wasn't done with copyright permission, and he published a pocket-sized Sansino version, which was illegal from a legal standpoint, American law, because it was copyrighted, but it was unethical as well. Nevertheless, this pocket-sized Sansino version was grabbed by everybody, including many, many prominent rabbis, because it was much easier than lugging 20-volume Sansino set around. It was condemned, yet it became very, very popular. So is there a bottom line? Not really. When you have a situation, you have to consult your local rabbinic authority. And sometimes the rabbinic authorities, based on the machlokas that we see, which most of the cases are unresolved, they will come to a determination based on what they see as the most appropriate. And sometimes their determination, from a layman's point of view, might seem to be unfair to the original person, especially if this person coming in is from the outside. And the two cases that we saw in Teaneck were people coming from the outside into the community to open businesses that were ongoing by local people and put them out of business. But that's an unfortunate end. So economic competition in some cases is limited. In some cases, it's not. There are many, many pieces to this particular puzzle. And in sometimes we encourage economic competition, and sometimes we restrict it. And in order to know when and how, you have to consult your local rabbinic authorities in any given case. But it is a very gray area, especially if in secular law, it might go against antitrust legislation. So that's a factor we have to keep in mind as well. So if a person doesn't get satisfaction to Bezdin, they may go to civil court to get satisfaction. So it's a very gray, murky area in halacha. And hopefully there'll be enough people in Bergen County and other places to support new businesses so everybody can make a comfortable living. Any questions on that? It's a fascinating topic, very complex. Okay. It would be interesting to see, most of the restaurants and the food is located in Teaneck, in that area. We have a number of food establishments in Fairlawn. If someone were to open up a competitive food establishment, if somebody were to open there are 2 pizza stores, and that apparently was not a problem. What if someone up another Chinese takeout place in Fairlawn?
Bite your tongue.
And the practical differences would be if it was located on the other side of Fairlawn or near where the current place is. If somebody opened up another, kosher supermarket in town as the population grows, is that considered hasagas gvul? And another bakery in town. Well, right now there's no bakery. Well, the only bakery in town now is further down on 208, which is out of the area where most people will probably patronize it. But anyway, it's a fascinating topic. I think that little bakery on the corner of Plaza Road and Walnut Avenue, I don't know how well they're doing, but somebody should get a hashgacha on that bakery. It's sitting in a wonderful location. I don't know how much business they're doing, but that would be a great place for a kosher bakery if the RCBC would pursue that avenue. It would be great instead of having to rush a Teaneck every time you need it. Want to go to bakery, get a challah or something.
Wally, I understood they tried to get him to make hashgacha, and he refuses.
Okay.
He doesn't want the Jewish business.
All right, we'll see what happens. I don't know how well he's doing in general, but all right. If he was approached, good. Anyway,
I can tell you one time I was going to open a print shop in Israel, and the Israeli government would not give permission because they said I would put 10 Israeli printers out of business.
okay.
That's why I'm still here.
Okay. All right. So there. The rabbinate was acting based on those Rishon who hold Hasagas Kvul applies today.
It wasn't the rabbinate; it was the government.
Yeah, but
the financial end.
Right. But Israeli law is a mixture of halacha and British law and Turkish law. It's all mixed up together. But somewhere in that mix is Hasagas Kvul. No question about it.
Wally,
Yeah.
does this apply to shuls as well?
It depends what kind of, yeah, it would. If it's like a Hasidic shtibel where you pay the Rebbe, basically it's in his house. He lives in a house and that becomes a shul, and all the money that is raised goes to the Rebbe to pay his salary. I don't think it would apply to shuls because the shuls are based on population. If there's a sufficient population to sustain a shul, I mean, Shomrei Torah started with 12 people in the rabbi's basement. And there was no other Orthodox shul, there was no competition. But as Shomrei Torah grew, and as the community grew, more people started moving into Fair Lawn, but they moved on the other side of town, which is a long walk. So they started another shul. It served that particular area of town. Now we have 7 shuls in Fair Lawn, each one serving a different community, and by all accounts, each one is thriving and being very successful. So if the population warrants it, I don't think it's a problem. And the same thing would be true of yeshivos, as long as the population is there. Now, a long time ago, when it was individual rabbis who opened up little schools and there weren't enough people to support the rabbi, that's a different story. But today, the population of Bergen County, Orthodox population, is growing by leaps and bounds. And there are many, I think there are 17 day schools now in Bergen County, which is wonderful. Ken Yerbu. And each one serves a distinct population. And those are similar, there's enough people around, as long as there's enough people to support them. And it's not, why would somebody want to open up another shul? Either because of geographic considerations, or because they have a particular charismatic rabbi that they want to support. And it doesn't necessarily take away from what already exists if there's a new population willing to support that particular institution. So that would not be a question of Hasagas Kvul. Hasagas Kvul is when somebody comes in without a sufficient population to support him and he tries to horn in on someone else's business. That's Hasagas Kvul. But even there, the rabbis in many cases are hesitant to prohibit it.
Wally,
You need broad shoulders. Yeah.
how do you factor in that when you have two businesses, there's 2 things that happen. Usually you get a better product, number one, and number 2, the prices might come down. So the consumer is really benefiting.
Yeah.
Does it have any weight in that factor over there? I mean,
absolutely. If you're offering a better product and you're not doing predatory pricing, absolutely permissible. I mean, look, you have 2 pizza stores in Fair Lawn. All right. One seems to be doing very, very well. The other one, not so well. But the one that's not doing so well may not be offering as good a product as the other one, or may not be open the same number of hours as the other one. So I don't think that's a question of Hasagas Kvul. If the first pizza place is not serving the needs of the community, and the second one is, it's certainly not a problem. But even if it were, there's enough population to support 2 pizza stores in Fair Lawn, if they wanted to go there. Same thing with restaurants. There's only, aside, you have a Chinese takeout. You have that Israeli place, what's that called, on River Road, which used to have a sit-down section. Now it only has takeout. Because for some reason, Fairlawn, I've often said, why is it that Teaneck is the center of all the restaurants and all the food establishments in Bergen County? My conclusion was that the women of Fairlawn are better cooks, and they like to cook. And nobody likes to cook. And you see women patronizing these stores on a Thursday or a Friday. They spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars to buy their Shabbos meals. It's crazy, but they do it. So Fairlawn, food establishments in Fairlawn have always had a rough time. There have been many bakeries that opened and closed. There are restaurants that opened and closed. I wish the ones that are open now will be successful and stay open for a long time. But there have been a number of places. There was a pizza store on Plaza Road that didn't make it. And then they became a fleishik restaurant, and they didn't make it. The population was there. Maybe it was the quality of the business. I don't know. The location, maybe. I'm not sure. But a number of businesses tried it, and they failed. The ones that are there now, hopefully, will be successful and continue to grow. Population is there. It's just a very quirky thing. But Asagas Gavul, as I said, what would seem to be logical is wrapped up in machlokes, and the conclusion that the RCBC reaches is that Asagas Gavul in our community doesn't apply anymore, which I personally disagree with. But then again, who am I to disagree with the RCBC?
Huh.
Anything else?
Yeah, I'd just like to mention a few weeks ago, Rabbi Benowitz, who is Rabbi Workflex McClinton, spoke in Beth Aaron, and the talk was about the history of Teaneck when he grew up in Teaneck in the 1980s, shall we say, or 90s. And he told the story. He was a mashgiach at the Hunan Teaneck, the Chinese restaurant in Cedar Lane. And then, at one point, Mabat Steakhouse opened up across the street. So he said to the guy who was, I think a Chinese guy who owned the restaurant, that I hope they don't succeed. I want to put them out of business, so we'll be doing more business. And the owner said to him, no, just the opposite. I want them to succeed because that way Teaneck will become a mecca for restaurants. Everybody will come to Teaneck. They know there are a lot of restaurants in Teaneck. So he'll succeed and I'll succeed too, because that way we'll have more of an area to get customers from. And so that was just very, very interesting. He said he learned a lot from this Chinese guy who owned the restaurant. And sometimes things aren't quite the way they look in the first instance.
All right. Meantime, Hunan is still here. Mabat is long gone.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's true.
But Teaneck has become a center for food.
Yeah.
No question about it.
Mm-hmm.
And Fairlawn, it just either it's slower to take off or whatever the reasons are. It just hasn't happened in Fairlawn yet. It may happen yet. We'll see what happens as the community is growing now. I suspect that in not too distant future, we will see more kosher establishments opening up in Fairlawn as the population grows.
Wally,
Yes.
What was just said has been discussed by people I know very often. The fact that in Teaneck, there are a variety of restaurants. So you have a choice. You go there, you pass in the area, let's go to that one. No, let's go to that one. Let's go to that one. Let's go to that one. If there are a limited number of restaurants in an area, people tend to stay away from it. So I think the more restaurants that are in a from area, the better they will succeed, because it gives people a variety to choose from, and people will come there because if one is filled up, they'll go to the next one, or they'll go to the next one.
Yeah, there's no question. You're 100% correct. The only problem is at a particular stage in Teaneck's development where you didn't have that large population and there were few restaurants and they were competitive with each other. And as a result, one was put out of business because there wasn't enough population. Once
I know what you're talking about. I understand that. What I'm saying is I know people who live in Fairlawn, and I know people who live in Teaneck say they'd rather go to Teaneck to the restaurants, even though the restaurants in Fairlawn are good, because there's more variety.
Yeah, no question. No, look, as long as they could support enough restaurants, and you go by, they're all full. Every one of them is full on a Sunday. They're all packed, and thank God.
Okay, so
doing
we
well.
have to find in Fairlawn a location whereby more restaurants, kosher restaurants, can come in next to each other, which are different type of restaurants.
Okay,
And
well,
that will build up the established restaurants. Except we don't really have the locations like they do in Teaneck, the streets, whereby
right.
you can open up multitude of
Well, the
restaurants.
difference is that Cedar Lane is a central location. We don't have a center of town location in Fairlawn. We have 2 or 3 different sides of town. There's no main street, so to speak, in Fairlawn.
Right.
Unless you want to consider the junction of Fairlawn Avenue and
Plaza Road.
Plaza Road, maybe.
Mhm.
Now they're going to be building a whole bunch of stores on that corner spot there, near the railroad track. So we'll see what happens down the road. There'll be condos there. There'll be stores there. Maybe it'll open up other opportunities for other restaurants to come in. As the community grows, we'll see what happens. Anyway, that's discussion. It's a fascinating discussion. Anybody else want to contribute anything? Okay. Have a wonderful Shabbos. Stay warm.
Thank you. Have a good Shabbos.
Have a good
Have a
Shabbos.
good Shabbos.